The royal palace of the Yalthine Empire stood like a mountain of silver and glass against the pale green sky. Its tall towers shimmered in the sunlight, but inside, the air was heavy with fear. In the throne hall, hundreds of alien nobles stood, in tense silence. The Queen of Yalthine sat on her high crystal seat, her 4 golden eyes fixed on the large medical platform before her. On that platform lay her daughter, Princess Alira, the heir to the throne, motionless and pale. Only, hours ago, the princess had been full of life. She had been returning from a diplomatic mission to a nearby moon when her convoy was attacked by unknown raiders. The palace guards managed to bring her back alive, but she had been struck by a strange energy weapon. The wound burned deep into her side, leaving strange black marks around the skin. The queen had immediately called her best physicians. They rushed in with glowing instruments and machines that hummed softly, but every attempt to heal her failed. The black marks spread like ink in water, and the princess's breathing grew shallow. One by one, the alien doctors stepped back, shaking their heads in defeat. "My queen," said the chief physician, bowing low, "this toxin is not in our medical archives. We have never seen it before. If we try the wrong treatment, we may kill her faster." The queen's eyes narrowed. "Then find someone who has seen it before," she commanded, but the hall stayed quiet. The attack had been a mystery. The weapon that wounded Alira was foreign, possibly human in origin. That was enough to make every alien physician hesitate. The queen was known across the galaxy for her kindness to her people, but also for her unforgiving judgment toward those who failed her family. No one wanted to be the one who made a mistake. The queen's advisors whispered among themselves, suggesting calling medical teams from other star systems. But the chief physician warned them. At the rate the toxin is spreading, she will not survive long enough for help to arrive. The tension grew. No alien dared to step forward. And then, the sound of boots echoed across the polished floor. From the far end of the hall, a man walked in, human, tall but lean, dressed not in royal colors but in a worn brown medic's coat. The fabric was patched in several places. His boots were dusty. A simple leather strap held his small medical bag at his side. The guards at the entrance stiffened. Some nobles frowned at the sight of him, clearly offended. But the man walked steadily toward the queen without bowing, without rushing, his eyes fixed only on the princess. The queen's guards stepped in front of him, crossing their spears. "Stop there, human," one of them said coldly. "This is no place for—" "I'm a medic," the man said in a calm, steady voice, "and I think I can help her." The nobles murmured in disbelief. The queen's golden eyes studied him closely. "Your name?" she asked. "Elias Wren," he replied. "Field medic, served on the border worlds." "You have the equipment to treat her?" the chief physician asked sharply, as if expecting him to fail the question. Elias tapped the side of his old bag. "No scanners, no nanobots, no advanced healing pods." He paused, and his voice became quieter. "But I've treated wounds like this before." Gasps spread through the hall. The queen's eyes narrowed. "Where?" Elias didn't flinch. "On battlefields your people have never stepped foot on. Places where you don't get to wait for perfect tools or perfect conditions. You work with what you have, or people die." The chief physician scoffed. "Even if you have seen such wounds, you would risk touching her? If she dies under your care, the queen herself will decide your fate." Elias's gaze did not waver. "If I do nothing, she dies anyway. I didn't walk into this palace to stand and watch." The queen leaned back in her throne, her expression unreadable. Around her, the alien nobles whispered warnings. Some told her to refuse. Others said she had nothing to lose. Finally, the queen spoke. "You claim you can help her, human, but you own nothing. You carry nothing but that bag." Elias looked at her with quiet conviction. Sometimes nothing is enough if you know how to use it. The queen studied him for a long moment. The hall was silent, every noble watching. At last, she gave a single nod. "Let him pass," she ordered. The guard stepped aside. Elias walked to the platform where the princess lay. Her breathing was shallow, her face pale under the dim palace lights. He set his bag down beside her, opening it carefully. Inside was a mix of old tools, metal instruments polished by years of use, small glass vials, bandages, and cloths. No glowing technology, no sleek alien devices. The queen spoke again, her voice sharp. "If you fail, human, there will be no mercy." Elias glanced at her briefly. "I didn't come for mercy," he said simply. "I came for the patient." The queen's 4 golden eyes locked with his for a moment. Then she fell silent. In that moment, the hall seemed to change. The nobles no longer whispered. The guards stood perfectly still. Even the air felt heavier. A human medic with nothing but skill and stubborn courage was about to try what the most advanced physicians of the Yalthine Empire could not. Elias rolled up his sleeves, took the princess's hand gently, and began his work. The moment Elias touched the princess's arm, the queen's advisors moved closer, their faces tense. They still did not trust this human. The chief physician crossed his arms and stepped forward. "Human, you should understand. The princess is not simply a patient. She is the heir to our throne. If you fail, you do not just fail her, you fail the empire." Elias did not stop his careful inspection of the wound. "I understand exactly who she is," he replied softly. "But right now, she's not the heir to a throne. She's just someone fighting for her life. And I'm not going to stand here doing nothing while that fight is happening." The chief physician's voice rose. "You speak as though you are the only one who cares for her life. Do you think we have not tried?" Elias finally looked up, meeting the man's sharp gaze. "I think you've tried the way your books told you to try. I've seen this before. Your methods won't work." The physician's jaw tightened, but the queen raised a hand to silence him. "Enough. Let the human speak." Elias turned back to the princess. "This isn't just a burn. It's an energy wound carrying a living toxin. On the border worlds, I've seen weapons that do this. The toxin doesn't simply poison. It spreads along the nerves, shutting down the body from the inside. If we don't stop it now, nothing will bring her back." Gasps echoed through the hall. The nobles had not heard such an explanation before. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward, curious despite themselves. One advisor stepped closer to the queen and whispered, "My queen, even if he knows what it is, he lacks the tools to treat it. He will kill her by accident." But Elias heard him and said firmly, "If I had the perfect tools, I'd use them. But I don't. What I have is skill, memory, and hands that have done this before. That's all I need." The queen's golden eyes studied him with unreadable depth. She had ruled for decades, and she had seen many people claim they could do the impossible. Most had failed. But something about this human's steady voice and calm hands gave her pause. "You do understand," she said slowly, "that if she dies under your care, my laws will require your life in return?" Elias didn't look away. "Yes, and I accept that." Her voice sharpened. "Why?" "Because I've seen too many die when I could have tried to save them," Elias answered simply. "I don't care about the risk to me. I care about the fact that if I walk away, she won't see another sunrise." The queen's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, but she said nothing more. The alien nobles began to whisper again. Some admired his courage, though they would never say it aloud. Others thought him foolish, a desperate man with nothing to lose. A young noble stepped forward, unable to contain himself. "Human," he said, "you have no wealth, no allies, no power in this empire. Why would you throw your life away for someone you don't even know?" Elias gave a faint smile without looking up from his patient. "Because she's breathing, and I can help keep it that way. That's enough." The young noble looked puzzled, but stepped back. The chief physician tried one last time to dissuade the queen. "My queen, this man is reckless. Even if he has treated this wound before, the physiology of our kind is different. His human methods may cause harm we cannot reverse." "Allow me to send for specialists from the core worlds." "Core worlds are too far," Elias interrupted quietly. "And if you wait for them, you'll be planning a funeral instead of a recovery." The queen's 4 eyes locked onto Elias's face. He had interrupted her chief physician without hesitation, and yet he had done so without arrogance. She sensed no hunger for power in him, only an unshakable will to act. "Chief physician," she said coldly, "you have had your chance. You failed. Let the human try." The chief physician's mouth tightened, but he bowed in obedience and stepped back. Elias began preparing. He asked the guards for hot water, clean cloths, and certain herbs from the palace gardens. The guards looked at him strangely, unused to such simple requests, but the queen gave the order, and they moved quickly. While he waited, Elias examined the wound again. The skin around it was darkened with branching lines, as if the toxin were drawing a map through her body. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. He touched the edge of the burn with a gloved finger, noting the heat and the slight tremor in her muscles. "She doesn't have much time," he murmured to himself. When the supplies arrived, Elias cleaned his instruments carefully, laying them in a neat line beside him. His movements were slow, deliberate, the kind of calm that comes from years of practice under pressure. One of the alien guards leaned toward another and whispered, "He moves like a soldier." "Maybe he was," the other replied. Before Elias began, the queen spoke again. "Human, if she survives this, you will leave this palace under my protection, but if she does not—" Elias finished her thought quietly. "I will not leave at all." She nodded. And then, before the entire royal court, Elias knelt beside the princess and began his work, not with glowing machines or advanced nanotech, but with the steady, precise care of someone who had walked through war zones with nothing but his bag and his will to save lives. Every noble in the room held their breath. The queen sat perfectly still, her eyes fixed on her daughter and the strange human who dared to try what all others feared. In that moment, the air in the grand hall seemed frozen. The risk was too great, the consequences too heavy. And yet, for the first time since the attack, there was a spark of hope. The grand healing chamber was silent except for the faint hum of the palace's life support systems. It was a room of white stone and soft green light, built for comfort, not for urgency. Yet tonight, it felt like the center of a storm. Elias stood beside the princess, his sleeves rolled up, his small medical bag open on a polished table. Around him stood guards, nobles, and the queen herself, all watching his every move. He ignored the weight of their eyes. His focus was on the wound. Princess Alira lay still, her face pale and lips faintly blue. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. The burn across her side was unlike anything the alien physicians had described to him, worse than he had expected. The edges of the wound were jagged and the skin around it had turned dark, with thin, branching lines stretching out like black roots under the skin. Those lines moved, slowly, but they moved, creeping outward. Elias had seen this before on distant battlefields. The weapon didn't just injure, it planted a living toxin in the body. If left alone, the toxin would spread through the nervous system, shutting down the victim from the inside. On humans, it was deadly within hours. On alien physiology, He could only guess, but from the look of her, she had very little time left. He turned to the queen. "I'll need boiling water, strips of clean cloth, and a metal rod I can heat until it's red." The queen's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why?" "Because the toxin is alive," Elias explained calmly. "If I cut out the dead tissue and seal the wound with heat, I can stop it from spreading. But it has to be done now," the alien nobles whispered in alarm. Heat-sealing flesh was considered primitive and dangerous in their advanced society. To them, it was like something from a barbaric age. The chief physician stepped forward again. "My queen, this is madness! He will burn her body!" "She will not survive such—" "She won't survive not doing it," Elias interrupted, his voice firm but even. "I've done this before. I've seen people walk away from wounds like this because we acted fast, and I've seen people die because we hesitated." The queen raised her hand to silence the protests. "Bring what he asks for," she ordered. The guards moved quickly. Soon, a bowl of steaming water arrived, along with folded cloths from the palace stores. A long metal rod was brought from the armory, once part of a ceremonial spear. Elias placed it near a heating brazier in the corner until it began to glow faintly. He dipped his instruments in the boiling water, then unwrapped a small vial from his bag. Inside was a fine, pale powder. The queen watched closely. "What is that?" "A mixture I learned from the frontier," Elias replied. "Ground bark from a tree that resists rot, mixed with a desert plant that fights infection. It won't kill the toxin, but it will slow it down while I work." Elias bent over the princess and worked quickly. First, he cleaned the wound with boiled water and the herbal mixture, speaking softly to her even though she could not hear him. He worked with care, avoiding any sudden movement. The toxin's black lines recoiled slightly from the mixture, confirming his suspicion. It was alive, and it didn't like what he was using. Next, he reached for his scalpel. It was old and simple, but its edge was sharp. He began to cut away, the blackened tissue in thin layers, careful not to damage the healthy skin. The nobles looked away, some unable to watch. The queen, however, did not blink once. The toxin resisted. In places where the black lines went deeper, Elias had to dig. Further than he wanted. Each time he muttered under his breath, working faster. He knew the longer the wound stayed open, the greater the risk. Finally, he set the scalpel aside and picked up the heated rod. Its tip glowed a dull red in the dim light. "This is the part you won't like," he said quietly to the queen. "But it's the only way." Without waiting for a reply, Elias pressed the hot metal to the edges of the wound. A faint hiss filled the air as the flesh sealed. The princess's body twitched slightly, but Elias kept his hand steady. He moved the rod carefully, sealing each edge until there was no path left for the toxin to travel. When it was done, he stepped back and let the rod cool. He cleaned the sealed wound again, applied a layer of his herbal paste, and wrapped it tightly with boiled cloth. The room was utterly silent. The queen finally spoke. "Will she live?" Elias didn't answer immediately. He placed 2 fingers gently against the princess's neck, feeling her pulse. It was still weak, but stronger than before. Her breathing had steadied just a little. "She's not safe yet," he admitted. "But the spread has stopped. Now her body has a chance to fight." The queen's gaze lingered on him. "You speak as though you have done this many times." "I have," Elias said simply, "but not for someone this important." One of the nobles, still pale from watching the procedure, muttered, "And yet he works as if she were just another soldier." Elias heard it but didn't respond. In his mind, it didn't matter if the patient was a soldier, a farmer, or a princess. They all deserved the same effort. He began preparing a small mixture in a cup, crushing dried herbs and stirring them into warm water. This will help her body recover, he explained. I'll need to stay with her tonight to watch for signs of the toxin coming back. If it does, I have to act immediately. The queen gave a single nod. You will have a guard, but you may remain here. As Elias settled beside the princess's bed, he saw movement in the corner of his vision. The chief physician was watching him, not with contempt now, but with something closer to curiosity. You are either very skilled, the physician said quietly, or very lucky. Elias looked at him, then back at the princess. Luck runs. Out. Skill doesn't. The physician had no reply. The queen stepped closer to her daughter, resting one hand lightly on the edge of the bed. Her voice was calm, but there was a hidden tension in it. If she wakes, human, you will have done what none of my own could. If she does not, Elias met her eyes, then I will answer for it. But I'm not planning to fail. The queen studied him for a moment longer, then turned away. The guards remained at their posts, and the nobles began to leave the chamber in silence. Elias stayed where he was, keeping his attention on the slow, steady rise and fall of the princess's chest. The hardest part was over. Now came the waiting, and the hope that the unfamiliar wound would not strike back before morning. The palace healing chamber had grown quiet. The nobles had left, their long robes whispering against the marble floor as they went. The queen had stepped out for a short time, though Elias suspected she would return before long. Only the guards remained at the edges of the room, silent shadows watching his every movement. Elias sat in a chair beside the princess's bed. His elbows rested on his knees, his hands folded together, and his eyes fixed on her face. The soft glow of the chamber, lights cast pale shadows over her features. She still looked weak, her skin cool to the touch, but her breathing had become steady and even. It was progress, small, but enough to keep him hopeful. The guards shifted now and then, their armor making faint clinks in the quiet. Elias ignored them. He had been in far noisier rooms during long nights of medical watch, field tents in the middle of artillery fire, cargo holds filled with wounded refugees, narrow ship corridors where every second counted. Compared to those, this palace chamber felt almost peaceful. But peace didn't mean safety. He leaned forward, checking the edges of the bandage he had wrapped earlier. The wound had stopped bleeding, and the toxin's black lines had not returned. That was good. Still, Elias knew toxins like this could hide deep in the body and flare up without warning. He kept his tools close. A small bowl of hot water sat on the table beside him, steam rising slowly. His old scalpel and clean cloths were laid out neatly, ready in case he had to work again. One of the guards finally spoke, his voice low. You do not rest. Elias shook his head. If I rest, I might miss something. She will not wake soon, the guard said. Our healers say recovery takes many hours. Elias didn't look away from the princess. I've seen people die in their sleep because no one was watching. I won't let that happen here. The guard fell silent, perhaps unsure how to respond. Hours passed. The palace outside the chamber settled into its night rhythm. The sounds growing faint, distant voices, the hum of ventilation systems, the soft patter of rain against high windows. Elias spoke now and then, even though the princess could not hear him. He told her about the rivers of earth, wide and green, with bridges stretching over them like silver threads. He told her about the way mountain air felt after a long climb, cold and clean, filling the lungs with sharp energy. He spoke about ocean waves, how they could be calm one day and roaring the next, yet always moving, always alive. He didn't know if she understood, or if his words reached her at all, but he kept talking. Sometimes, in the field, he had found that voices could guide people back from the edge. At some point, the queen returned. She entered without a sound, her long cloak flowing behind her. She walked to the foot of the bed and stood there quietly, her 4 golden eyes studying her daughter's face. "She looks stronger," the queen said softly, though her voice still carried authority. Elias nodded. "She is. But I'm not letting my guard down yet." The queen looked at the tools beside him. "Your methods are strange, crude even. Yet, they have done more in one night than my best healers could in hours." Elias gave a faint shrug. "Sometimes the simple way works best. On the frontier, you don't have a choice. You use what you can find, or you watch people die." The queen's gaze moved to his worn medical bag. "You truly have nothing else? No advanced instruments, no healing machines?" "This bag is all I have," Elias said. "It's been with me for years. Everything inside has saved lives." The queen was silent for a long time. The night deepened. Hours passed in slow rhythm, Elias checking her pulse, her breathing, the color of her skin. The queen remained in the room now, sitting silently on the opposite side of the bed. The guards stayed still as statues, though Elias noticed they were watching him with less suspicion now. Once, in the middle of the night, the princess stirred. It was only a small movement. Her fingers twitched against the blanket. Elias was beside her, instantly checking her vitals. Her breathing hitched once, then smoothed again. The queen leaned forward, but Elias shook his head gently. "She's holding on. That's what matters." The queen didn't reply, but he caught the faintest shift in her expression, a flicker of relief. Elias stayed awake by habit. In the field, he had trained himself to go without sleep when a patient's life depended on it. His mind stayed sharp, every small change in her breathing or heartbeat registering instantly. At one point, he heard footsteps outside the chamber. A palace servant entered quietly with a tray of warm broth and bread. She placed it beside him and bowed before leaving. Elias took a few bites, then returned his focus to the princess. The queen spoke quietly. "Do humans always keep such watch over the wounded?" Elias considered the question. "Not always. But I made a promise to myself years ago, never leave a patient until I know they're safe." Near dawn, the first pale light touched the chamber windows. The rain had stopped, leaving the air cool and fresh. The princess's breathing had grown stronger, her pulse steadier. Elias allowed himself a small breath of relief. The queen noticed. "You believe she will wake?" "Yes," Elias said. "Maybe not today, but soon. She's past the worst of it." For the first time since he had entered the palace, Elias thought he saw the queen's stern expression soften. "You may be a man with nothing, human," she said quietly, "but you have given her something no one else could." Elias didn't answer. He just adjusted the blanket over the princess's shoulder and returned to his silent watch. When the sun rose fully, the palace came alive again with distant voices and movement. But inside the healing chamber, time still seemed slow. Elias remained at her side, ready for whatever came next. The night had been long, but it had brought change, subtle, unspoken change. The queen's eyes now held a trace of trust. The guards no longer looked at him as an intruder. Even the chief physician, who stepped in briefly at dawn, looked at Elias with quiet respect before leaving without a word. Elias knew the fight wasn't over, but for now, the princess was alive. And that was enough. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the palace's tall windows, casting soft light across the healing chamber. The room, which had been tense and silent all night, now carried a quieter kind of anticipation. Elias sat beside Princess Alira, watching her chest rise and fall steadily. Her breathing had grown deeper over the past hours, and her pulse was strong enough to reassure him that she was coming back from the brink. He gently brushed a loose strand of hair from her pale face. "Almost there," he whispered. "You're doing well." The queen entered silently as she had the night before. She had been away, attending to other matters of state, yet she returned at this crucial moment. She stopped at the edge of the bed, her golden eyes fixed on her daughter, studying every detail. For the past night she had watched the human, Elias, work tirelessly. His methods had been unusual, and yet nothing had harmed her daughter. If anything, his careful skill and dedication had done what no alien physician could. The queen's lips pressed into a thin line. She did not often show emotion, but something shifted inside her. For the first time, she felt a strange combination of gratitude and awe. Elias looked up briefly, meeting her gaze. "She's stable now," he said, "but she will need time to fully recover. Don't leave her alone just yet." The queen nodded slowly, acknowledging the man's authority over this situation, even though she had once believed no human could understand or aid her people. A soft movement stirred on the bed. The princess's eyes fluttered open, uncertain, at first. She blinked, as though trying to adjust to the light and the presence of so many around her. Elias leaned closer, speaking softly. "It's okay. You're safe now. I'm right here." Elira's gaze met his, and for a moment, she did not speak. Then, in a voice hoarse from weakness, she whispered, "Thank you." The words were simple, but they carried weight. In them, she expressed gratitude beyond what Elias could have imagined. The queen, standing nearby, remained silent, though her eyes glimmered with a rare light of relief and pride. Elias smiled faintly. "You've been through a lot. Take your time. You're safe." The princess tried to sit up but faltered. Elias gently supported her, keeping his hands steady beneath her arms. "Don't rush," he said, "one small step at a time." The queen moved closer, placing a hand lightly on the edge of the bed. "Human," she said, her voice firm but softer than before. "You have done what my best healers could not. You have saved my daughter's life." Elias shook his head. "I only did what anyone with hands and a will to act could do. She deserved a chance." The queen's golden eyes studied him for a long moment. She could see the honesty in his gaze. He had risked everything, and yet he had asked for nothing in return. "Then you will not leave this chamber until she can walk?" she asked. Elias's eyes met hers. "No, not until she can move safely. Not until she is fully awake." Slowly, Elira's strength began to return. She lifted her head and looked around, taking in the queen, the guards, the nobles who had remained in the room, and the human who had saved her life. Her eyes lingered on Elias. "Why would you risk yourself for me?" she asked softly. Elias considered the question. "Because someone had to. If I walked away, you would have died." "And I couldn't do that." A flicker of understanding crossed her face. For a moment, she saw not just a human in front of her, but a person who had acted with courage and compassion, risking everything for someone they barely knew. The queen's voice broke the silence again. "You have nothing, human. Yet you gave her everything." Elias shook his head, modestly. "I only used what I had." The queen's eyes narrowed slightly. "Do not misunderstand me. I do not mean to praise lightly, but in our empire, such courage is rare. You have earned respect, even among those who once doubted you." The chief physician, standing nearby, inclined his head in silent acknowledgement. Even he, who had been so critical, could not hide his respect. Alara shifted, and Elias steadied her once more. "You're awake now," he said softly. "Try to breathe slowly. That's it. Good." She nodded weakly, then looked at the Queen. "Mother, I'm alive." The Queen's stern expression softened. She reached out and placed a hand gently on her daughter's shoulder. "Yes, my child. Thanks to him, you are alive." The princess turned to Elias, her voice still quiet but more confident. I owe you my life." Elias shook his head again. "No debt, just care." Her lips curved in a faint smile. For the first time, she seemed less like a princess of legend and more like a young woman, grateful and alive, discovering the kindness of someone she had never expected to trust. The Queen finally stepped closer to Elias, her voice steady now. "You came into my palace carrying nothing but your bag and your courage, and yet you have done what all others could not. Tell me, human, what do you want in return?" Elias considered the question. He looked at the princess, then back at the Queen. "Nothing," he said simply. "I never came for reward. I came to save a life. That is enough for me." The Queen studied him, and for the first time, there was something in her eyes like admiration. "Very well," she said. "But know this, you will not leave here without my protection. You have earned a place in this empire's memory." The guards straightened, and even the nobles who remained were silent. The room felt different now, filled with quiet respect and gratitude. A human, with nothing but skill, patience, and courage, had changed the course of a royal life. Alara, still weak, reached out her hand toward Elias. He took it gently, steadying her as she sat up. "You saved me," she said softly. "I will not forget this." Elias smiled faintly. "Just take your time and recover. That's all I ask." The Queen, observing the interaction, allowed a small nod. She had seen many humans in her lifetime, but none like this. None who had risked everything and expected nothing in return. The room fell into a calm silence, a quiet that was full of new beginnings. For Elias, the night had been long, but the reward was real. The princess was awake, alive, and safe. The Queen had acknowledged his courage, and in that moment he understood something he had always known. Sometimes even those with nothing could give everything that mattered most. The palace had slowly returned to its normal rhythm. Courtiers moved through the corridors, guards changed shifts, and the distant hum of machinery marked the start of a new day. But within the walls of the healing chamber, time seemed to have slowed. Elias remained beside Princess Alara, ensuring she was steady and comfortable. Her breathing was strong, her pulse regular, and a faint color had returned to her cheeks. Though weak, she was clearly on the path to full recovery. The Queen observed silently from the edge of the bed. She had spent hours watching the human work, marveling at his patience, skill, and determination. She had ruled for decades, yet she had never witnessed anything like this. A man with nothing had saved her daughter, using only courage, knowledge, and unwavering focus. The princess shifted slightly and looked up at Elias. I feel better," she whispered. "Stronger." "You've come a long way," Elias replied, smiling faintly. "Rest now. You've earned it." The Queen finally stepped closer, her voice calm but filled with authority. "Human," she said, "you have proven yourself in a way no one in this empire could imagine. You risked everything for someone not your own, and you asked nothing in return. That is courage beyond measure." Elias shook his head. "I did what anyone should do. I couldn't walk away while she was in danger." The Queen's golden eyes studied him for a long moment. You will not leave this palace without my protection. You have earned it, and more." The guard straightened, and even the chief physician, standing nearby, inclined his head in respect. The entire room seemed to pause, recognizing the significance of what had just occurred. Elira reached out her hand, and Elias helped her sit up. "You saved me," she said, her voice filled with awe. I owe you my life." Elias smiled gently. "No debt, just care. That is all I ask." The Queen spoke again, her voice softening slightly. "But a life saved is a life changed. You have changed our kingdom tonight, human. The story of your courage will be remembered for generations." The princess's eyes brightened. "I want everyone to know, he is the one who saved me. Not the healers, not the machines, not anyone else. Him." Elias felt a wave of humility wash over him. He had no desire for fame, no longing for titles or rewards. All he wanted was to help those in need. And yet, the acknowledgement from the Queen and the princess was more than any human accolade could ever be. The Queen extended her hand to Elias. "You have done what none expected. From this day forward, you are recognized as friend of the crown. You may enter any part of this empire safely, and you will be welcomed by those who serve it. Your name will be remembered alongside the greatest acts of courage in our history." Elias accepted her hand with a simple nod. "I am honored," he said quietly. "But I only did what I had to do." The Queen's expression softened further. "Sometimes doing what is necessary is the greatest honor, and you have shown us all what true courage looks like." The guards, who had once regarded him with suspicion, now looked at him with respect. Even the chief physician, who had doubted him at every turn, bowed his head and murmured, "You have taught us a lesson tonight, human, a lesson in courage, patience, and the value of action over fear." Elias simply nodded. "I only followed my instincts. That's all any medic can do." Elira, feeling stronger, shifted to face the Queen. "Mother, will he stay?" she asked softly. The Queen considered this for a moment, then replied, "He may stay as long as he chooses, and when he leaves, he will do so knowing that he has changed more than one life tonight." The princess looked at Elias with gratitude. "I cannot thank you enough," she said. "Not just for saving my life, but for giving me hope when all seemed lost." Elias shook his head again. "No thanks needed. You survived. That is enough for me." The day moved forward slowly. Courtiers began to trickle into the chamber, bringing warm food, clean water, and quiet congratulations. Yet Elias remained, focused on the princess, checking her pulse, her breathing, and making small adjustments to her comfort. Every gesture was careful, deliberate, and gentle. The Queen finally addressed the room. "Let it be known across the empire, a human with nothing has proven that courage, skill, and compassion can achieve what the greatest technology and wealth cannot. Let this story remind all who hear it that value is not measured in possessions, but in deeds." The room fell silent again, the weight of her words settling over everyone present. The humans and aliens alike understood that this was no ordinary act of healing. It was a bridge between worlds, a moment of pure heroism. Elias prepared to leave the chamber later that day. He packed his small bag with the tools he had used. Careful not to disturb anything else, the princess, now sitting upright with a blanket around her shoulders, watched him quietly. "You saved me," she said again, her voice steady, "and you did it without asking for anything." Elias smiled faintly. "That is all any of us can do. Help when we can, and hope that it is enough." The Queen approached, her gaze steady. "Remember, human, you now carry the respect of a kingdom. You may leave, but your deeds will follow you wherever you go. You have earned a place in our history." Elias bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. "I am honored, my queen, and I will remember this night always." As he left the chamber, the corridors of the palace seemed different. The weight of judgment had lifted. In its place was acknowledgement, respect, and a quiet understanding that one person, even with nothing, could make a difference beyond measure. Outside the palace, the city bustled with life, unaware of the quiet heroism that had taken place within the royal walls. Yet among those who had witnessed it, stories would spread. The tale of a human who risked everything, a human with nothing, who saved the heir of an alien empire, would become legend. It was a story that would be told and retold, inspiring generations to come. A story of courage, of compassion, and of the power of a single determined heart. Later, when the palace was quiet and the sun set behind the tall towers, the queen looked out over her city. Her daughter rested safely in her chambers. And in her mind, she thought of the human medic, Elias, who had proven that sometimes the smallest acts of courage can change the fate of a throne. He had arrived with nothing, but in the end, he had given everything that mattered most, and in doing so, he had not only saved a life, he had saved a legacy. The story of Elias, the human medic who carried nothing but skill, courage, and compassion, spread across the empire. Songs, tales, and quiet conversations remembered him. He had bridged two worlds, showing that heroism knows no species, no title, and no wealth. The empire would never forget the night when a man with nothing changed the fate of a princess, the respect of a queen, and the hearts of a people. And Elias? He left quietly as he always had, knowing that he had done his duty, and that sometimes doing what is right is the greatest reward of all.